official welcome to everybody. The Housing First Europe Hub is a partnership of organizations, housing providers, cities, government ministries, foundations, and others who have come together about 6 years ago now. We got started. We came together because everyone believes that Housing First can be an important contributing factor to helping to end and prevent homelessness by making sure that we start with housing and support that people need and help to move our systems to a much better approach to tackling homelessness. We do that work by focusing on research, on training, on advocacy, and on communities of practice, where we can bring people together so that they can exchange knowledge and ways to overcome challenges, and that we can work together to try and achieve this very ambitious goal at national as well as European level. So we are about to have a brand new website in the next few weeks. So we would encourage you to check out our website when you have a chance. You'll find a lot of information about the training that we mentioned, about other resources. We have some really good new papers on this idea of systems change and using Housing First to reduce and end homelessness. So I invite you to take a look at our website when you have the opportunity. But now I would like to welcome our speakers today. And I'll repeat one more time for all the people who've just arrived that please use the chat and the question and answer section to ask your questions as we go along, because we'd really like this to be as informative and informal a session as possible. So I think I won't take a lot of time to introduce everybody. I would rather ask you to take the moment when you start your presentations to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from and what, where you're working.
So I'm Samara Coupechoux, and I'm research manager at Abbé Fondation on European topics. And we are a foundation well known in France because we work on housing exclusion and homelessness since 30 years now. And we work on all the topic of housing exclusion, from homelessness to energy poverty and eviction and so on. So Housing First is one of our topic, of course. And we decided since 2017 to work on the possibility to use European funds to fight homelessness and to fight housing exclusion. So the first step was to see if we could use it with the present operational programming in France. And it was not really the case because in the historic of using European funds in France, we used to use it for unemployment and training for young people and so on. And housing was not a topic to promote for these authorities in France. So the first step was to work with authorities at national and regional level to include in the discussion of the new MFF the possibility for our organizations, but also for local government to use European funds for housing exclusion and also for Housing First, of course. So it was quite difficult at the regional level because each region use the. This is not FEDER in English, and I'm sorry, I don't know the
ERDF.
Okay, ERDF. So we use it. We try to use it at the first step for energy poverty and to build the renovation wave. But the idea was also to use this fund for the renovation of buildings in the goal of producing some social housing for people with low incomes and people from coming from homelessness. So we manage it in some region in the north of France, for example, or in the south of France, and also in Rhône-Alpes. We can use it for promoting some social housing for people in needs. And it's also included in the Roma strategy, we can say, and migration strategy. So it's also a way, because in France we have a lot of people living in slums, and it's also a way to manage the fight against slums in France. So this quite it was quite difficult because each region had its own decision on the way that they use the funds. But at the national level, it was really quite interesting because we work with the authority managing the ESF, and we managed to have some good coordination between DIAL, which is an interministerial direction, with the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Social Inclusion, and Ministry of Employment, and so on, all together to work on housing exclusion. And we go to see the market, we can say, no, not market, le ministère du Travail, I'm sorry, Labor Ministry. The Labor Ministry, which is the authority on ESF in France. And we showed them that there was a goal of fighting poverty and exclusion at the European level, and that they had to include this in their programmation because it was a goal that was not attempted at European level, and it was important to use housing as a tool against exclusion. So they worked a lot to be sure that all the projects, Housing First project, could be funded by ESF in France. And you have to know that in France we have national plan, Housing First national plan. It's a 5-year plan, and the idea is that the state asks all local governments to engage themselves in Housing First projects. So, for example, you have big cities that were volunteers to say, okay, for the 5 years to come, we will try to put Housing First leads on our territory, and we try to fight homelessness in this way. So we will transform the way that we work on our cities. And the idea now is to use this new programmation to promote European funds to these collectivities, these local governments, and to be sure that they can use the European funds. So if you are interested with this, I have just a little slide with the different actions that can be funded. So promote active inclusion, and with these actions, individualized and adapted accompaniment toward employment, including training, remove all social barriers, inclusion and retention of disabled workers in employment. So this is the inclusion, and fight against poverty and exclusion. And so there you can see that you can have new way to support people, identification and reception of the most excluded people. So this is a really large definition, and it was the purpose was to be sure that we can include all kind of public with vulnerabilities. social support and remobilization, including cultural, sports, and leisure activities, because in France we have a lot of organizations working with homelessness, but also vulnerable people that work with sports, culture, and it was important to be sure that we can have also that kind of actions in our projects. Access to right was a big deal because it was important for us to show that access to rights was one way to prevent homelessness, and that we have to include it in action supported by ESF+. And for example, we put in people at risk of eviction, and it was important to fund the action prevention of eviction, and training and professionalization of workers at social and medical social field. So this is for the training of people. And one part was totally dedicated to access and retain and maintain people in housing. So multidisciplinary support towards and in-house housing, including for households in temporary accommodation. So you see that everything was thought to include all action that we can put in place in France to implement housing first at local level. And maybe to conclude, I just want to speak to present you a project that we have in the pipeline, but it's not already done. The idea was to put an end to slums in Montpellier at the south in France, because we have a lot of slums there. And we made a coalition of civil society organization to present a project to eradicate totally the slums. And we asked the metropole, so the big city, to support the project, because we think that for civil society organization, sometimes it's too risky to use European fund, and it's really difficult. So the idea was to let the public government to manage the project, and to use organization inside the project. And so this project is interesting because we use public funds from state, from local governments, from private funds, and from European funds. So we hope that it will see the light one day. For the moment, it's not the case, but well, it's a big project, and I hope I will present it to you in details in few months. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how even with a national strategy or a national plan on housing first, that can also help to sort of help cities to see that you can use this as a priority, but also then being able to understand what can then be the added value of using the EU's funds, and how do you link up to those priorities. I think, like you said, there's quite a broad definition. So I think there are quite a lot of opportunities. But in the case of France, I know that there are these regional, sort of sub-national decision-making bodies on how the funds get used. And so you need to be able to work with those regional authorities as well. And so, yeah, that adds an extra layer. Not insurmountable, but not always simple. But yeah, that's really, really great. Thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll ask people to continue to put their questions in the question and answer section. We'll take a look at them as we go along, but we'll maybe get these sort of initial presentations from everybody first, and then come back for a round of questions. So Vanesa, shall we try to go to you?
I'm Vanesa Cenjor. I'm the International Affairs Director in HOGAR. I'm working in HOGAR in Spain. That is a non-governmental organization with with more than 20 years of experience. And here we have the second slide. And we work in all over Spain at national level, and we are the only organization doing this, because the other organizations are at regional or local level. So we work with homeless people, and we work to ensure that no one lives on the street. And we do it with a human rights approach, rights to housing, to employment, to health, to not being discriminated, and so on. So now, the important thing, what about EU funds? So they have given us some questions to try to inspire our presentation. So I'm going to try to focus only on 3 of them, because all were very interested. So the first one that I choose, it was the translation of EU projects into long-term sustainable funding. And it's linked in some way to use that funds to achieve systemic change. That it was another question that they were asking us. For us, there is only one answer, and it's a policy will. As you know, structural funds are addressed to promote a greater degree of economy and social cohesion in Europe. But after of this, the final responsibility in policies is on the member states. So in this sense, EU funds can be used in different ways. So in our case, we are doing it into 2 different ways. One, it's through the resilience and recovery facility, that it was the mechanisms created by the EU during the pandemic, and the aim is to mitigate the economic and social impact of the coronavirus pandemic and make European economies and societies more sustainable, resilient, and better prepared for the challenges and the opportunities in the future. And one of the mechanisms, the most important, or the mechanism that has allowed more budget, is the Next Generation EU. And it's one of we are managing some projects under this within this fund. The 3 sorry, because with the resilient plan, the national the state members had to prepare a national plan to say how they spend the money. So we were very lucky. We were doing a kind of advocacy, of course, but we were very lucky. And in the Spanish plan, there was focus, one of the components, because it was a very huge plan and with a lot of activities, but we had one part focus on homelessness. So we took this opportunity, and we had running 3 different projects, as I say. So the aim of this component in Spain, it was to have pilot projects to introduce good practices that finally, at the end of the project, could be implemented as national policies. So for this aim, we have these 3 projects. That one is based on the right of housing, and it's focused on the institutionalization, making activities such as closure of our shelters to be part to a more permanent housing, and also transformation into a more housing perspective, their own shelters, and also prevention of homelessness. So with this 2 main lines, I said the institutionalization and prevention, We include as well support for autonomy, employment, and access to affordable housing. The second project is focused on a pilot project about housing first for youth. Directly, there's no more explanation about that. And the last one is an evaluation project of personalized employment pathways. So in all these cases, the public administration must be involved because it was a requirement of the CAL. So we have the participation of 10 public administrations at regional and local level, and of course, at the national level, which is the promoter of the CAL. So, and the two first projects we are carried out with in partnership with Provivienda as well. So, the second way that we are trying to use in EU funds, it's also linked to this pilot project, because we are trying to work with these public administrations to include new operation in their operational programs under the new period that Sarah mentions before, because in our case, it was very difficult as well, because the previous period was focused on employment and other kind of inclusion, not for homelessness in housing or in other kind of support. So we are trying to work with this public administration because this will mean the sustainability of the project after its end in 2024, and having some more time to include finally in the public policy the activities that they had been carried out under the Next Generation EU funds. So and now, for just two slides more, the other question that I was thinking about, I don't know if it's working the PPT, but it doesn't matter. It's regarding how have we work across different levels of government, local, regional, national, to access funding. Again, the reality is not easy, but the answer is it's going to the right person at the right time. I'm so sorry, but for us has been working this kind of actions. So, for example, regarding the Resilience and Recovery Plan, we were continuously looking at the information at the EU level and alert to the transition to the national level in different ministries, because in the beginning the information was not clear. So at the same time, we started to work internally in thinking about what we would like to do and proposing to different administrations to see if they will be interested in collaborating. Those 10 administrations that now are working with us in the project. We asked for more administration, but at the end, it was there was those 10 public administrations. So our experience says that these processes are long to define, but short of applying for. And that in our case work to be making things in advance. It was the best way to do it. And in the case of the structural fund, the work has been different and longer, much longer. We have been working together with FEANSA since the first step of the negotiation at the EU level. This began in 2019, and during this step, the aim was to achieve FEANSA was fighting for this, the possibility that homelessness was included in the general regulation, because if this was not possible, nothing to do after. So at that moment, the European Commission was thinking about the possibility, but they needed data, more information to ensure that it will be necessary to include as a specific target group. So then the pandemic arrived, and all of us knows what's happened, a lot of homeless people on the streets, and then the European Commission didn't hesitate much more to include it. So the second step, it was to achieve that the member states select the priorities, as Sarah mentioned before, for their programs. In our case, we are working on this directly with the public administrations involved in our projects, as I explained before. So helping them to push the inclusion of these new objectives, because it's very difficult. So we don't know yet if it will be lucky, but we are trying it till the end, because our operational programs are not approved yet. So this is the moment. And finally, some challenges that I think that can be interesting, that it's two that we overcome and two that we don't. So we overcome the knowledge. I mean, EU funded is not easy at any level. The architecture, how it's managing, how is all this thing. And we now know how to operate and how to be involved after a lot of years, and that has been an advance. And also we overcome the barrier of talking about this issue directly with public administration, with the stakeholders, because we have been using our contacts with the public administration in our projects as the first channel. So this has been very useful, but we are still facing the lack of information on time at the national level, because even being in the appropriate networks, if you are not in the front line, it's very difficult to have enough time to react or to be involved. So that's still been difficult, at least here in Spain. And also, it's other challenge that we are facing is the difficulty in managing these funds, because it is difficult to manage. And this is one of the reasons for the impediment to include in new activities. So we are fighting against this to say it's possible to include. We know, look France, look other countries, and look other possibilities, and also, first of all, look the interest of the European Commission in doing it. So do it. And that's everything for me.
Thank you, Vanesa. Yeah, we know we ask everybody to say a lot in a very short amount of time. So thank you for rising to the challenge. And I think it's really useful to see how important it is to know what's happening sort of at the EU level and also at the national level, and to also within your own organization be mobilized to put in the effort to do it, because it can really pay off, but it does take quite a lot of effort and time to do so. So thank you again to everybody out there in viewing and listening. Please, continue to put your questions into the chat, into the question and answer. We've been watching that as well. And I think we'll move now on to Caterina from Italy. And I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Samara. Good morning. My name is Caterina Cortese. I'm from Italy, and I work in Fio.PSD. Is Italian Federation of Organization working with homeless people, and FIOPS is an umbrella organization working for promoting rights and human rights to homeless people. And we are a full member of ANSA. Thank you for the invitation. So everything started when 70 years ago, homelessness got in the national political agenda. It's a very milestone, because it was very important for homelessness, became a topic of political agenda. And the guideline from the ministry helped to promote innovative perspective for solution for solving homelessness, and housing first was the best way. Okay, and we have dedicated specific EU funds to tackle homelessness in Italy in the last seasons, and you can see in this slide the main EU project funding like ESF used for reinforcing homelessness services in terms of training of social workers, training and employability for the private people, pilot project. EF have the fund for renovating buildings and social infrastructures and to promote affordable housing. And of course, FEAD funds was very important for reinforcing material assistance, and also for the virtuous use of the FEAD in Italy was use the FEAD for promoting also pathway to autonomy inside the Housing First project, and based on housing kit for social inclusion. And so we have also a specific government financing instruments. And 7 years ago,
sorry, Caterina, can I, sorry, just the slides are not moving. Are you moving in your slides? Because we can just see the first slide still. Sorry. That's okay. We're listening very carefully, but I think you might already be on a different slide. So
it's useful if you can see. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. No, there we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
I leave a small picture, yes. Okay.
Yeah, it looks good now. Now we can see the slide like EU, experience from Italy. Now that's the slide we see now.
Yes, okay. Experience from Italy, because we have also these specific funds. The ministry launched the specific instruments for financing services for homeless people, including Housing First projects. And 50% of the fund was the European Social Fund and 50% was FEAD. And in this case, the beneficiaries of the fund was regions and municipalities, because like said Sarah or Vanessa before me, yes, it's very important that public bodies was coordinator of the public resources and involving NGO organization for dealing project. It is very important, but the very news in Italy was that the responsibility return to public services, also for homeless people. And this experience, what's happened? Okay, you can see in this picture the virtual use of the EU funds. In particular, 8 out of 10 municipalities have used EU funds for financing Housing First and housing-led projects. Yes, of course, we have used fund for basic needs, for case management, for daily centers, and so on. But the most part of the municipality, after the specific fund, a specific action from the ministry in the guideline, have decided to invest in this challenge, because Housing First today in Italy is also a challenge for manage. Okay, and this one is a picture, and this one show more or less the kind of services today we have in Italy for homeless people. And so you can see we have a sort of polarized services, because we have from one side solution for basic needs, night accommodation, sub kitchen, outreach works, and from other hand, the very development of Housing First project. And the 35% of services funded by ESF and FEAD was dedicated to Housing First. So the main results about the thinking and rethinking services. Yes, the combined use of these ESF and FEAD has get good results in Italy. And this was very important to invest in capacity building of the public services, very, very important. And this funding was favored the multi-level governance, because from the ministry, from the EU level to the ministry, the resources was spread to regionals and the municipality for dealing services for homeless people. And of course, Housing First and housing-led has been promising approach. yes, we also go toward a systematic change. I remember the beautiful conference in Madrid in 2 months ago. And yes, we believe that homelessness is not emergency phenomenon, and homelessness needs to a structural paradigm, to structural planning of resources and capacity to solve, to end homelessness. And okay, housing first, housing led, also in Italy has been a fundamental level of change of paradigm for rethinking services and for rethinking the homeless people as people with the rights to housing. And currently we have more than 100 homeless people in Housing First project, a Housing First project by European funds, but not only, because we have also independent Housing First project. Okay, for the future now, we have for the next season of EU funds, refinancing of the ESF and OP1 FED, refinancing 50 million for intervention to combat severe marginalization, and from the next year generation EU, the Mission 5, the investment more or less for 250 intervention for housing first or temporary housing for homeless people and vulnerable people. This is a picture, a small picture for the future, and it is a very challenge for us, and thank you.
That's a very good overview, Caterina. Thank you. I think it's really also very interesting for us to see, yeah, again, how the national level can use, well, with help from the civil society, can sort of use the EU funds as a lever to do more than they might have intended to do at the start. So that's really interesting. So, and really, yeah, I think there will be lots of questions for you coming up in the chat. So thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll move now to Czech Republic, and Michal, if you're, Jakub gets to go at the end because his last name starts with W, so he's at the bottom of the list alphabetically. So Michal, if we can hand over to you and ask you to introduce yourself a bit. I think also for the participants, it's Michal is actually from a public authority, so I think that will be an interesting perspective and help to have a really good discussion and dialogue as we continue. So over to you, Michal.
Thank you, Samara. So my name is Michal Ďorď. I'm head of the Housing First team at the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. We have a special unit or department inside of the ministry that's dedicated to issues of social inclusion and so on, homelessness. And we like in well, I think what you want to know is whether we use EU funds for Housing First or Housing Led. We do, and we've been doing that for a little while. In I think 2016, we used, or the Civil Society, some specific organization asked for EU funds for a pilot Housing First project. We gave it to them. They did some great evaluation, like randomized control trial, to find out whether it works. And they publish, reports and all that. And right after, or like by the end of this project, when we already knew that it was really successful, really good, like after first year, 96% of the people who got the housing managed to stay in the housing after a year. So we knew that it's working, the project is good. And so the civil society wrote in cooperation with managing authority call, funded from EU funds, focus on Housing First. And from this call, were funded 13 additional Housing First projects. So in 2016, we had this like first pilot project, and starting in 2019, we had 13 more projects. And these 13 more projects are finishing this month and next 2 months. And we did, as a ministry, not the managing authority, but my department, the department where I work, and some other department at the ministry, we did like thorough investigation and evaluation of the project. And we still keep doing that to convince, not only public, but also, the politicians and the civil society that Housing First makes sense. And so, and civil society actually, the umbrella organization for promoting Housing First and rights of homeless people. They did part of that evaluation as well. So we basically have like 3 types of evaluation. We are evaluating impact of these projects, 13 projects. What that means, we basically, give some like questionnaires to all these housed families and individuals. And we gave them these questionnaires before they moved in the new housing, year after they moved in. And this year we are doing the 2 years later survey. So we give them, these questionnaires again. And by the end of this year, we should have the results of how they are doing, these families and individuals, after the first year. And then next year, we should have results for the impact after 2 years. So that's just one type of evaluation, and that's the type that my colleagues from the ministry are doing. There's another type, and that's done by the civil society, by the umbrella organization. So they are actually figuring out how well are these projects, like how is their fidelity to the Housing First principles? Because all kinds of organizations and projects can say, yeah, we are Housing First and so on. And so we want to know, we want to make sure that, our Housing First projects in Czech Republic are good, which is why, we actually used EU funds and gave them to the civil society to figure out what's the fidelity of these Housing First projects that are also funded by EU funds. And my team also does this not very scientific evaluation of what's going on in the field, and how we are, for example, asking how many dogs these families have, all kinds of stuff, just it's more qualitative evaluation. And that there are some other kinds of field evaluations we are doing. So but basically what I'm trying to say is the first project that was here done by civil society and funded through EU funds was done only by civil society, and we try to do as thorough evaluation of it as possible, or they did, the evaluation as possible, to make sure that it's like it's evidence-based, and to further, the argument that, yeah, that's the way to go. The staircase model is obsolete. Then we started doing these 13 projects. They were funded by through this like special call that was drafted by the managing authority and the civil society. So the guys from civil society wrote it. I'm not kidding. They wrote it, and throughout these last 3 years, well, like they wrote it. I did not, even though I worked at the ministry at the time, because at the ministry, and I'm not speaking about the managing authority, they are just like managing funds. At the ministry, at the department, which is focused on social housing and tackling homelessness and so on, there was basically no one who would be an expert on housing first. The experts were all in the civil society, which is why, civil society was asked to draft the call on housing first. And my department and I were basically tasked to oversee these 13 housing first projects. And the guys from the civil society were overseeing them too. So we were basically meeting on weekly basis, online or in person, with guys, with people from these 13 projects all over the country. And we were meeting them, helping them, guiding them, learning from them how they do these projects. And I and my team were basically like trying to make sure that they follow the rules, the conditions of the call. So they follow the housing first principles and so on. And in last 3 years, the department at the ministry, my department, we gained so much experience, so much expertise that when it was decided that there's going to be a new call on housing first, in support of housing first, we were like included in the like workforce, the like task force, basically the group of people who were drafting the new call. So when the first call was drafted only by the civil society and managing authority, this new one, which we just finished, was drafted by the civil society, by the umbrella organization, by my team, and my department, which should have known earlier, way more about housing first and housing land. But we learned, and we also asked, people from the Ministry for Local Development, where, these guys from Ministry of Local Development, they are responsible for, the EU calls focused on construction of social housing. So to make, the calls on construction or building of social housing, and the soft, projects on in support of housing first, like projects. We wanted them to be compatible, so we asked, the guys from the Ministry of Local Development to join us, and basically we met all together on regular basis, like every month, I think, and we just debated, hey, so guys, who knows a lot about DI, who knows about this and that topic that should be included in the call and that we should support, through the call. And yeah, based on, you know, who knows what, we just like told, okay, you guys from civil society write this part of the call, we will write this part of the call, and so on. And that's how we did it. And the call is focused only on housing led and housing first. And it's a big shift in a way, in Czech Republic at least, because in the past, just a few years ago, the calls we had that were announced through managing authority that were focused on tackling homelessness, or projects tackling homelessness, these calls not so long ago allowed for, you know, projects, allowed funding for projects that use the staircase model. And we knew they didn't work well and so on, but like, but this has been like kind of like forgotten, and the new calls are only focused on supporting housing-led and housing-first projects. And in the new call, well, one like just to
Yeah, if you could take just another couple minutes, and so we can move to Jakub, and then we'll come back, of course, in the questions. But yeah, please take a few minutes.
Just like two more information about the call. It's the first call that will be announced from like the new like EU funds. Very first call, like from it's the first call. Like this may show you how like important to, you know, us it is. And the second thing, we will allocate 40 million euros over like next 6 or 7 years. I don't remember how long is the programming period. I think until 2027. And and one more important thing, I don't know how these goals are like how they are like formed or made in other countries, but basically if you are NGO or a city, village, I don't know, you can you get money. Your budget is basically like part of the budget. 60% of the budget is for your staff. So you just tell us, you need this many social workers, you know, I don't know, nurses, psychologists, I don't know who else in your team, in your housing first team or housing led team. And then you get additional 40% of the budget, with which you can, like, I shouldn't say it like this, but you can do whatever you want with the money, with the 40% of the budget. But it has to somehow like serve the people and the purpose of the project, which is tackling homelessness or ending homelessness of the people. So, for example, if you have a family, they've been, you know, tense or whatever, and you think that it would help them psychologically to go with their kids to zoo, and you would want to buy them a ticket to zoo, go for it. We don't care. Like, if it serves a purpose, we support it.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, I think maybe we leave it there for Czech Republic, and but I think there will be lots of questions for you in the chat, as well as the questions and answers, and we'll have another round, an opportunity to for everyone to come back and ask each other questions. But thank you. I think it's a really unique example of how, that connection between civil society and a ministry being really engaged in wanting to learn and taking that opportunity to learn. I mean, we see some parallels elsewhere, but I think it's a really interesting example of how much faster you can go when everybody is trying to be on the same page. So thank you. Jakub, I'll pass over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jakub Wilczek. I work in the Polish National Federation for Solving the Problem of Homelessness, which is simply a national umbrella of NGO service providers, much like Fio.PSD in Italy, though we are considerably smaller than Fio.PSD. I'd like to tell you about the lessons we've learned from an ESF project. We were, as a federation, implementing together with Son Brother Albert's Aid Society, which is a major national network of providing services, mostly in shelters, in staircase model. But with this project, that was one of the first pilot housing first projects in Poland. They are switching to more housing-led or housing first approach. Well, I think the first thing I should start with is that we're probably far behind to all the countries that were speaking before me. We only have, as I said, 2 projects at the moment. One is a local project in Warsaw with 20 flats. The other one, we as Son Brother Albert and National Federation are implementing is for 30 flats in 3 cities, Gdańsk, Warsaw, and Wrocław, 10 flats in each of these cities. And recently we have heard that there are some other minor initiatives in Housing First. For example, Krakow has a program with only 3 flats, but it shows that there is a framework for scaling up Housing First in Poland. Anyway, Housing First for a long time was considered in Poland to be implemented, but it was always thought of like too controversial method, and it was very difficult to find funding for this kind of programs. So the fact that we had the opportunity to finance Housing First programs from ESF was partly a coincidence, and partly a lot of advocacy for that. It all started in 2017 during the ESF transnational network meeting organized by Fianza in Brussels. We were gathered in one room with managing authorities from quite a few countries, including Poland. So what we've learned from that meeting is that Polish managing authority has a lot of money left for transnational cooperation projects, and we just told them that we should do some Housing First. Then if you still got money, if you can announce a call, let's do Housing First. The problem was that transnational cooperation projects have their own limitations, and I will go through that within the challenges part of my presentation. But anyway, we started cooperating with the managing authority in 2018. We were actually helping them writing the call, much alike to the Czech experience. And also we have, again, in cooperation with Fianza and with the transnational network, we have held a conference in 2018 where we asked people from abroad to come for a matchmaking session, simply to allow Polish NGOs to find partners for this call, because as I said, that was a transnational cooperation priority. So in each of the projects there was an obligation to have a transnational partner to implement their solution to the Polish soil. In 2019, we had the call solved and we had agreements signed. There was 10 housing projects within the call. 2 of them were strictly Housing First. The 2 I've started my presentation with. And 2020 and 2021 was the period over which the Housing First services were actually funded from the ESF. So at the moment, both of these projects are still on. They are still financed by the ESF, but mostly within the mainstreaming of the results. The very core of the projects, so housing plus services, are not financed by ESF anymore. They are now financed by the municipalities in which the projects are implemented. So moving to challenges, first of all, I have to say that partnership with municipalities is absolutely essential. The partnership with municipalities helps solving most of the challenges we have encountered during this project. I think the major challenge, of course, in Poland is providing housing. And you have to know that in Poland, ERDF is not accessible directly for NGOs. You cannot, as an NGO, just simply put your or file your project to ERDF. You can do that only through the municipality. And combining two different separate projects, one in ERDF, one in ESF, is very difficult. So I have already seen that people from the audience are asking questions about using ERDF for Housing First programs. I'm very interested in that because in Poland we have a model called cross-financing, which means that a part of your ESF project will be financed by ERDF, and it can be spent on things typical for ERDF. So among other things, providing housing. But the problem is, the larger the project, the smaller the cross-financing. In our project, it was only 5% of the overall budget. So when we divided that 5% into the flats we were planning to open, it was more or less 1,000 euro per flat renovation, when the average need was about 12,000 euro. So the municipality simply provided small flats with no need of renovation. This is very rare thing in Poland. It is very difficult to obtain such housing from the municipalities. So that was a huge help from municipalities, but unfortunately it took time. This caused a lot of delays at the beginning of the project. We've planned to start working with the project participants in January 2020, and actually some of the participants moved to their flats as late as June or July in 2020. So there was a half a year delay in some cases. The other major problem causing delays was, of course, COVID, which overlapped with entire project. So problems with acquiring and renovating housing is probably the major barrier in Housing First in Poland. And I must say that EU funds don't help very much here. So I'm looking for your experiences in providing housing within the ESF projects. Another problem was the research. That was, again, limitation caused by the transnational character of the call. We've been told that only ex post research is possible. There was no fidelity. I mean, we wanted to do the fidelity study, but the managing authority said that it is not a part of their transnational priority. So after all, we did all the required research, including the fidelity study, again, within the municipality financing. They simply agreed. They simply thought it's important to have this kind of research, so they decided to pay for it. Length of financing was, again, another problem. We only had 18 months of financing of the core services in the project. It was extended by another 3 months, but you have to remember about the delays at the very beginning. Luckily, the ESF projects in Poland require the sustainability period, which means that whatever you do during the ESF project, you have to keep doing that after the ESF projects with your own money. So partnership with municipalities again was very crucial here, because right now municipalities are funding the Housing First services. The evaluations shown very positive results in housing retention. We had an 81% rate of housing retention. We also had good results in stability of living, health, substance usage, psychosocial behavior. Much less in the areas of social integration and structured activities, especially employment was very scarce. We hope that this will change in the next evaluation, because the last evaluation we had was a year ago. Right now we're preparing to go through another evaluation process. And we believe that this was caused by exactly the problem with short timing of the project. We believe that people who were in Housing First decided to go along their pyramid of needs, as Maslow called it. So they started with stability in housing, then they worked on their health, and hopefully right now they will be more or less ready to start working on their integration. Another problem was cost effectiveness. We didn't achieve very much here. The project, or Housing First in general in Polish condition, is not cost effective against rough sleeping or using shelters. We've been tracking all the participants of the project, and we've have identified their usage of public services for 6 months before joining the project. And it seems that even though the usage of public services is going lower during the participation in the project, it's when you add the costs of Housing First, it's still much more expensive than staying on the street or staying in shelters. So we of course know that cost effectiveness is not the most important factor, but it may become an important blockade in scaling up Housing First. And last but not least, challenges connected to the nature of EU projects. This is really a difficult area because, well, simply speaking, EU projects are a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of management, a lot of things that you simply don't want to be focusing when helping people. So if you decide to go with an ESF project in Housing First, you have to be ready for that. Then a few words about long-term sustainable funding. As I said, partnership with municipalities is the answer here. They are actually obliged to finance the services in our projects for a couple of years after the ESF financing ends. But this requires thinking ahead. You have to think that way before you start writing your application. You have to be sure that there will be a partnership with municipality, and you have to be sure they are willing to do all these things. Another thing that was an important part of the ESF projects we had that was that the results required, among others, was including Housing First in local legislation, in the housing policy of the municipalities that were involved. And that, of course, happened. This is a solid foundation for scaling up Housing First in these municipalities. And we already see that, for example, in Warsaw, there was 10 flats in the project. Right now, there is 16 already. So you have to think about a roadmap for scaling up locally, of course, but also about using the example of your project as a framework for scaling up for entire country, of course. And last but not least, advocacy, which is very, very important. As I said at the beginning, Housing First must be named directly in your regional operation programs, or equivalent you have in your countries. Because in our regional operation programs for the 2014-2021 period, there was, of course, housing support. But much like in Spain, in what we had in Vanesa's presentation, Housing First was simply too complicated to fit in the description that was in the regional operation programs. So probably too controversial as well to be assessed positively. So the two projects we done was actually a coincidence, because if we didn't meet with the EMA on that meeting in Brussels and didn't learn that they still have money for transnational cooperation, we wouldn't even go there. But when we had that hook, we started to advocate a lot, and this was very important for the success of these two projects. Other lessons that we learned during these projects is that social housing is rather more effective here than private market, but this is probably relatable mostly to Central and Eastern European countries, the situation on our housing markets. We're very strongly looking into the social rental agencies model, especially right now during the Ukrainian refugee crisis, and we really believe that those two can be connected. Social rental agency as a source of housing in cases when the municipalities do not have adequate housing first, and this is like a normal situation in Poland. We can try to go to private market, but lower the cost thanks to the SRA model, and then do housing first services in this housing stock. So just to sum it up, I think using ESF for housing first is quite a difficult. It is quite a challenge, but it's definitely worth trying it. I know that in Western Europe, not very many NGOs are using ESF money for housing first, probably for different reasons than here in Poland. Simply speaking, in Poland, on one hand, there was no housing first in ESF. We hope that in the new period it will be named directly in the regional operation programs. But on the other hand, there is absolutely no source that would give us a 1.2 million euro for housing first program, like happened in this case. So I think try to plan ahead, to try to figure out whether this is helpful for your organizations or not. But I think this is a huge opportunity. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jakub. I think it's a bit of sort of serendipity, being in the right place at the right time, but then being able to use that and build those networks like you have. I think it's really interesting too how the local authorities you're encouraging them to change their own policies and their own legislation. I think that's something that others are doing as well, but it's a really useful lesson. We have a few minutes left for the questions, and we have Vanesa whose computer shut down and is coming back in. So hopefully we'll see her again soon. But there was one question I just wanted to ask. I can bring it in from the chat. It was about it was from World Habitat about or from Ella, sorry. Does anyone have any experience of the Pact of Free Cities or other examples of local government bypassing national government to access EU funding for housing first projects? No, that's Ella's question in the chat. No. Okay. And just to see, I mean, there was one question in the question and answer, a couple in the question and answer. Jakub, there's a question for you now, a couple in the question and answer. And then there was one, so the first one that came up in the question and answer is, do all the mentioned projects apply all the principles of housing first, or have people had to adjust their projects due to a different national regulation? Does anyone want to come in on that briefly?
Well,
yeah.
The projects I've been speaking about, especially the one I'm working with, the San Brother Albert's one, the Polish National Federation is a partner responsible for research and evaluation in that project. So we've been doing the fidelity study in autumn 2020, and the results were very positive. We had a high fidelity, over 89%, depended on the city, because we had 3 cities to check. I think the highest was 96%, so it was very a good result. And right now we are going through another fidelity study. So we're hoping to compare the results from the period when the services were financed by ESF to the period where services are financed by municipalities. Because the municipality funding is considerably smaller than ESF, there is a chance, of course, that some of the fidelity aspects will look worse because of lack of funds. People decide would decide to lower the quality. We will see that in about a month. I think at the end of June we'll have the fidelity report ready.
Okay. I just see another one in the chat, and maybe Jakub, you could look at the ones in the question and answer on cost effectiveness and take a minute to see if you want to answer. There was a question about sort of from civil society, does the principle of the fastest finger apply when you are applying for EU funds? I guess that means sort of the first come, first serve. I wonder if that's, or maybe it's about, yeah, how do you get your project through in versus competing against other civil society organizations? Does anybody want to respond to that? Michal?
Well, in Czech Republic, we are going to have this call on housing first. We already kind of are finishing one with the 13 projects, and we had allocated or will be allocating certain amount of money. And in a way, it's like it works according to the principle, the first finger or whatever that was, because, well, in some way it works like that, in some way it doesn't. Well, you after all have to bring a high quality project, get certain like evaluation like of the project and certain like number of points. And if you manage to do so, you'll get the funding. From our experience, the allocation for the goal was always bigger than, you know, the number, like it was bigger than was needed. Like in the previous allocation for the Housing First project, the 13, there was in fact we actually and the civil society, you know, went to certain NGOs and cities which we thought would be interested in this call, and we tried to convince them to apply to this call. We will be doing, by the way, this same thing, you know, this year as well, you know, because we know that, you know, some NGOs, especially the small ones, you know, who don't have many experiences with managing, you know, EU funded projects, are afraid of them. They're like, it's too much money, too much work. And so yeah, we will be and we were talking to them and trying to convince them, and the projects that they brought amounted to less than what the call, you know, allocated. We think in this next call that's coming in this month, actually at the end of this month, we think that there will be more organizations interested, or we hope. Then what's the allocation? And in case that happens, I think there will be a discussion between the umbrella organization, the civil society, and the managing authority and my department about where to get money from the EU funds or somewhere else to increase the allocation.
Okay. so that you don't have to then choose. You can.
So they don't have to like be like we have to.
They don't
be
have to
the
compete
first ones.
against each other, and instead, if they're.
And they are not really competing because they are still afraid. Like Jakub said, you know, in our first project and the very first Housing First project in 2016 was perceived very controversially, especially in like in terms of like public opinion. Like, and there was lots of naysayers, even in the like government, you know, even in my department and so on. They were like, we are not sure it was so good, you know. So yeah, it took a little bit of convincing, and the fact that they did the evaluations and try to, you know, do some science along helped a lot. And you know, and then the next call and the next one we are like announcing this month are kind of like our own, you know. It's not just a project created, conceptualized by civil society. They don't ask us, we create it for them. So we are like in a way the owners, and we are trying to promote it. So that's like one important thing, I think, to like learn, that you have to kind of get inside. And for example, I used to work in civil society. One of the reasons why I started working at the ministry was, you know, to change the ministry and the approach, you know, to this and other issues from inside.
That's a very good tip. Maybe I realize that we've gone a bit over time, so I was gonna say maybe if people have one or two more things they'd like to add, but then otherwise I think we should probably wrap up, because I know people need to get off to their lunches and have probably not scheduled to be here for much longer. So maybe I'll ask Jakub if you want to come in, and then Sarah, Caterina, Vanesa, if you just have something you want to say at the end, I would invite you to do so. But first to Jakub.
Yeah, I want to answer those two financial questions, and I will try to be as brief as possible. The first one, I'm sorry if the name is written in Greek, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it. The first one is about comparing the costs of Housing First to other services, and whether Housing First achieved more for the beneficiaries. We didn't actually check that, because one of the limitations of the transnational priority was that we couldn't have the control group to compare the results with groups using other services. But as practitioners, we can obviously say that the results were huge, especially that we've taken on a very difficult group. One of the minimum requirements was at least 6 years spent in rough sleeping or low threshold services. And this is why I said that the financial argument is not not the most important one, but it is very important for public authorities. So we will be more than happy to be cost effective. Unfortunately, we're not. So we will look into scaling up, and we do hope that in larger scale, the cost effectiveness will be better. But due to services for homeless in Poland, shelter services for homeless in Poland being very cheap, it will be a very difficult task to overcome that problem. And the other question from Emilia is about the gathering data on services used before joining Housing First, and them being quite low. Yes, the problem is that the usage of healthcare services, as you wrote as an example, is very low among rough sleepers in Poland. Another thing is that the police doesn't want to have very much in common with rough sleepers. So stays in jails are very uncommon among Polish rough sleepers. Especially that there's a huge difference between Poland and probably other Eastern European country and Anglo-Saxon countries in which trespassing is something you go to jail for. In Poland, if there is no other crime done, it's not a crime; it's just a petty offense. So If the police found somebody on private property, they just remove them from there, and there is no other punishment. So the costs within the judiciary system are almost not existent for us sleepers in Poland. Yeah, that I think that hope that this answers the question. But yes, we see a lot of differences between Eastern and Western Europe, and we see that they may be the cause of the costs incurred before housing first being very low. Just one example: the person who incurred the highest cost over a period of half a year, their costs were a bit less than 20,000 euro for half a year. So if you know the data for your countries, that's probably very, very little. So it is hard to achieve cost effectiveness for housing first. If for one person per month it costs, in our project it was about 2,000 euros. So very close number to the highest number of costs incurred.
Great, thank you. Sarah, did you want to come in with anything before we close? No. Okay, Caterina. No.
No, maybe about the cost of housing first. Yes, it is the question. We have a monitoring in Italy, and periodically we reveal the cost of housing first, and more or less we estimated 28 euros per night per person every day. It's very not expensive. And yes, about the funding, usually Housing First receive funding from national, from EU, but also from local resources and domestic resources and civil society and organization. Maybe sometimes housing is a charity property or public property and the private market, of course. Costs are different on the basis of the projects.
Yeah, great. Vanessa, did you want to add anything at the end here?
Just the thing that I always say here in Spain as well, that it's possible to do it. So still trying. And if you don't know a lot of how to do it, look for help, because for example, the hub is preparing something. I don't know if Samara.
Yeah, I mentioned it at the beginning. It'll be ready soon.
There are a lot of things to use to be helpful. So do it and don't hesitate. Ask people and share the best practices that are all around Europe.
Great. Well, I think that's an excellent note to end on, because that's exactly what I would invite everyone to do, is to not hesitate to try and think about what's possible in your context. Like Vanessa said, we're publishing a guide that just sort of lays out the basic principles, because as you will all know, like looking for this information online is not always very easy. So we're trying to sort of signpost you and help you go to some of the key websites from the commission, and to find where you can get that national information, because it sometimes changes. So you need to keep looking for it. And we've included in that guide a case study from Italy, from Czech Republic, and from France, and we are adding more as we go along. So we will definitely be asking Vanessa for some more information. And I would put an appeal to you as well, is if you have already used the funds and you have an example that you could share with us, we would really like, or you know of something else, let us know. We'll be collecting them over the next few months and adding them to our website as we go along. And I think that this is also really helpful for you to know that, you know, this hub is a partnership, and it means that our partners are the experts. And so we would be very happy to put you in touch directly with putting you guys on the spot again, but that, you know, we can organize something like this again, or gather some questions that we can put to people. So I think if we all wanted to use these funds in the most effective way possible, we need to use our collective efforts to do so. So maybe this is just the first of many online gatherings that we can come together and keep asking and answering the questions. So thank you to everyone. Thank you especially to the speakers for taking us down this complicated, but you made it sound very clear and straightforward. So well done on that. And thank you to all the participants for joining us this morning. And I wish you all a very nice and sunny afternoon. Thank you.